Alrighty folks, so today we are talking about banding. I look so ridiculous. Let's just get into the video. Alrighty, so yeah, let's just get this off of me. Welcome back, folks. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for dropping by and your ongoing support. My name is Patrick, host of the EDH Brutality YouTube page, which uploads Magic the Gathering content and analysis every Sunday. Now, before we get into today's exciting deck tech, a quick and special thanks to patrons like you for making videos like this possible. As always, timestamps will be provided throughout the video, as well as a full Mox Field link provided down in the description below. With that out of the way, we can finally jump right into today's commander, Ayesha Tanaka. Ayesha Tanaka is a 2/3 legendary creature, human artificer from the set of Legends, coming in at 2 blue and 2 white mana that reads Banding. Tap an artifact effect which requires an activation cost is countered unless its controller spends 1 white mana. This ability is played as an interrupt.
Hey yo, what the f?
But you want to know what's interesting? Other than the revised tech, the reprint of this commander in the set of Chronicles just 2 years later swaps the mana symbols for some reason. I have no idea why, but hey, it still costs the same. Now you're probably all wondering, why are we using such a horrible commander? Well, we're using it for 2 reasons. One of which...
I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm kind of retarded.
The other, of course, is not from its utility-based activation, but in fact the keyword banding. After all, this is a banding themed deck, so it's always nice to have an additional creature with the keyword within the command zone. What exactly is banding? Well, banding is a now discontinued keyword within the game of Magic the Gathering, which allows you to take any number of creatures with the keywords bands or bandings and one without to form a collective unit known as a band of attackers. Pretty much all you have to know is it's the power of friendship. Now, some takeaways for a single band of attackers, they do not share key abilities, as well as if a single creature is able to be blocked within a band of attackers, every creature within that band is now considered blocked by said creature. Unfortunately, this means you have to pay attention. Now, this mechanic isn't horribly bad, it's actually quite good. So let's discuss that. Let's say we have 2 creatures with banding, as well as 1 creature without the keyword. We've declared this group as a single band of attackers, and our opponent puts up a blocking creature. Of course, this is the ideal thing to do, as our opponent doesn't want to take any damage. And typically, combat would go as follows. The defending player would then take his creature and choose which creatures to assign combat damage to. Now, this typically will be in his or her favor, choosing which creatures get dealt damage and which creatures die. However, this is where the strength of our banding mechanic comes in play. Banding as a mechanic states,
I like this. This is cute. I want this inside of me.
Giving us full power within the combat damage assignments. We can use this to divvy up our opponent's creature's damage equally among our creatures, so none die. For example, if our opponent's creature is a 3/3 and we have a 2/2 and 0/3, we can choose to have the defending player's creature deal 2 damage to 1 creature and 1 damage to our other, ensuring none of our creatures die. Or if we brought a non-banded attacker within our group of bands, we may choose to assign all combat damage to said creature to be in our favor. Now, the reason why this mechanic was never printed again is because it gets a little more confusing. And what I mean by that is the rules for declaring a band of attackers differs from the rules of blocking with banded creatures. But believe it or not, blocking is much more simple.
Bruh.
All you have to know is if your opponent attacks you, you can choose to let the damage go through single block or multi-block as a normal game of Magic the Gathering. However, if you decide to multi-block a creature and one of those creatures has the keyword bands or banding, you may equally divide and distribute the combat damage of the attacking blocking creature throughout every creature multi-blocking that creature, which makes it pretty much the same as attacking, but instead of only being able to bring one creature within your band that doesn't have the keyword, you can bring any number as long as you have one with the keyword ability.
I don't get it.
And honestly, this is where the mechanic really shines, since we are able to choose how combat damage is assigned. Let's say, for example, our opponent swings a Blightsteel Colossus at us. Well, if we stick a 1/1 banished hero in front of that Blightsteel to block it, without the keyword banding, Blightsteel would just trample over and kill us with infects. However, since we have the keyword banding, we get to choose how the damage is assigned. So rather than having the trample damage be assigned to us, the player, we may choose to have all 11 damage be assigned to our banished hero.
Hey, that's pretty good.
And there you have it, it's banding summed up in a nutshell. If you're interested in looking up the full and complete rule set explained by a MTG judge, I do have a full length video linked down in the description below. And with that, we can finally jump right into the premise of today's deck, and that is to outwit our opponents with several bands of attackers and slowly beat them down through a course of a game. Now, aside from our commander, we do have 21 individual bands or banded creatures within this brew, and we'll not be covering them all in this video due to redundancy. As a matter of fact, most of them just have the keyword bans or banding. So rather than repeat myself, we are just going to cover a few today, as well as how to abuse them with non-banded creatures as well as other effects. Starting with Battering Ram, coming in at 2 generic mana, this artifact creature with erotic text states, at the beginning of combat on your turn, Battering Ram gains banding until end of turn. Whenever Battering Ram becomes blocked by a wall, destroy that wall at end of combat, which is a great way to hose any Arcades deck. We've got Knights of Thorn, which is a 4 mana 2/2 with banding and protection from red, ensuring we can freely swing into those mono red decks. We have Ayesha Skirmishers, which not only has bans and first strike, but grants all creatures that band with Ayesha Skirmishers the ability as well. Up next, we do have Camel, potentially my favorite creature within this brew. This simply states bans. All creatures attacking in a band with Camel are immune to damage done by deserts. And last but not least, our final banded creature you want to keep an eye out for is an Urza's Engine. Now, this is an expensive 5 generic 1/5 artifact creature with trample. However, for 3 generic mana, we can give it banding until end of turn, or if we pay another 3 generic mana, we can give all creatures banded with the Urza's Engine trample until end of turn, which is a rather strong ability. And since a band can bring 1 non-banded creature within it, in most cases we will never have to pay the first ability to give Urza's Engine banding until end of turn, making its effective cost much lower than appears. Like I said previously, the rest of the creatures within this brew that have banding do nothing other than that, so we'll not be showcasing those just due to redundancy. However, we do have 4 creatures within this deck that do not have this ability that are perfect to bring along in our band of attackers. The first of which being a Sapperzan Heir. Coming in at 1 generic and 1 blue mana, this 1/1 creature merfolk reads, whenever Sapperzan Heir becomes blocked, you may draw 3 cards. Normally, this is a creature that no one would block, because who really wants you to draw 3 cards? But if paired in a large enough band of attackers, your opponents will have no choice other than to block the band or take a lot of damage. Next up, we have Abu Jafar, which is the father of Death Touch. That's right, this 0/1 white mana creature states, if Abu dies without generating while participating in attack or defense, all creatures Abu is blocking or being blocked by are also killed and may not regenerate. Which, once again, your opponents we face take a lot of damage or lose every creature blocking the band of attackers. Next up, we have Keldon Battlewagon, coming in at 5 generic mana. This 0/3 artifact creature reads, Trample. Keldon Battlewagon can't block. When Keldon Battlewagon attacks, sacrifice it at end of combat. Tap an untapped creature you control. Keldon Battle Wagon gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is a tap creature's power. We'll discuss later within today's deck tech how this single card can turn into a repeatable win con. But before that, let's talk about our final creature without banding that we would like to highlight within today's video. That being Dreamfighter, coming in at 2 generic and 1 blue mana. This 1/1 Summon Soldier reads, whenever Dreamfighter blocks or is blocked by a creature, Dreamfighter and that creature phase out. Or if in a band of attackers, meaning any creature blocking your band of attackers phases out. This pairs particularly well with our previously mentioned Urza's Engine that can grant all of our creatures trample, which is rather important here because without trample, none of the damage would go through. Now, it should be no surprise by now, banding is a rather weak mechanic on its own, but together it is rather strong. For anyone familiar with the creatures, you should also know that the creatures are really weak. As a matter of fact, we don't have a single creature within this deck with power greater than 2. However, this can easily be abused. That's right, we've got cards such as Crackdown coming in at 2 generic and 1 white mana, an enchantment spell that reads, non-white creatures with power 3 or greater don't untap during their controller's untap steps. Or better yet, we have a Meekstone coming in at 1 generic mana, an artifact spell that reads, any creature with power greater than 2 may not be untapped as normal during the untap phase, meaning our creatures will remain unaffected. And of course, if the board is getting out of control, we can also abuse cards such as Retribution of the Meek, coming at 2 generic and 1 white mana at sorcery speed that states, bury all creatures with power 4 or greater. Once again, all leaving us untouched to create one-sided scenarios and advantage. Now, of course, trying to win through combat damage with a bunch of weenies is not going to do us any favors here. So a way around this is through pump spells.
Nothing will stop me from getting a pump.
To name a few, we have Warrior's Honor, stating all creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Morale, once again, giving all creatures +1/+1 until end of turn. Warrior's Charge, doing the exact same thing, although this time at sorcery speed. Valorous Charge, giving all white creatures +2/+0 until end of turn. Righteous Charge, giving all of your creatures +2/+2 until end of turn. Ramosian Rally, which may be cast for free at instant speed, giving all creatures +1/+1 until end of turn, as well as Army of Allah, giving all attacking creatures +2/+0 until end of turn at instant speed. If you like these effects and want them to be repeatable, we have Soltari Champion coming in at 2 generic and 1 white mana, which states Shadow. This creature can block or be blocked by only creatures with Shadow. If Soltari Champion attacks, all other creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn, as well as Mightstone coming in at 4 generic, reading all attacking creatures gain +1/+0. And last but not least, the best pump spell within our brew, coming with a Gerard's Battlecry. At just 1 white mana, this enchantment spell reads, pay 2 generic and white mana at instant speed. All creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. So, is this repetitive? Absolutely, but that's the whole idea here. We want to consistently pump up our small banded creatures to become lethal threats. Now, of course, it doesn't matter how consistent our deck is if we can't draw these cards, so let's discuss our card draw package. Starting off, we have the typical Mystic Remora as well as Rhystic Study, both taxing our opponents whenever they play a spell in order for us to draw a card. But you know what I enjoy more than these two cards? Are similar effects that don't give our opponents options. That's right, we've got Insight coming in at 2 generic and 1 blue mana enchantment spell that reads, whenever an opponent casts a green spell, you draw a card. We also have wheel-like effects to supply steady card draw, whether that's through Windfall or a Memory Jar. Of course, in a full pre-modern deck, we can't forget the OG Howling Mine, which is a 2 generic artifact spell that reads, each player draws 1 extra card each turn during his or her draw phase. Time Spiral is a great include, which if left uncountered, forces each player to shuffle their hands and graveyard back into their library. Its controller untaps 6 lands, as well as everyone at the table draw 7 cards. Brain Geyser is an easy include if we pay 2 blue mana and X generic to draw that many cards, with my favorites in the deck coming in with a Keep Watch at 2 generic and 1 blue mana instant speed states. Draw a card for each attacking creature, which could be used even during its controller's attack step, ensuring you draw the most amount of cards possible. A Pursuit of Knowledge, which is a 3 generic and 1 white mana enchantment spell that reads, skip drawing a card, put a study counter on Pursuit of Knowledge, remove 3 study counters from Pursuit of Knowledge, sacrifice Pursuit of Knowledge, and draw 7 cards. And last but not least, a Slate of Ancestry, which for just 4 generic mana states, pay 4 generic and tap. Discard your hand and draw a card for each creature you control. Now, to ensure we can cast all of the cards that we are drawing, this deck is equipped with some ramp, the first of which being Sisei's Ring, for 4 generic, which reads, tap to add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. Play this ability as a mana source. And for similar effects, we have Thran Dynamo, stating add 3 colorless mana to your mana pool, Worn Power Stone, which enters tapped for 3 generic mana, in which we can then later tap for 2 colorless mana at instant speed, as well as Soul Ring. For a similar effect on a land, we do have Temple of the False God, which says tap to add 2 generic mana to your mana pool, play this ability only if you control 5 or more lands. Or for that colored mana, we do have a Seashell Cameo, stating tap to add a white or blue to your mana pool, as well as Soul Grail, which is an artifact spell for 3 generic mana that reads, when Soul Grail comes into play, choose a color. Tap to add 1 mana of the chosen color to your mana pool. Play this ability as an interrupt. Now, unfortunately, there's not too many of these options if we're going for the pre-modern restriction. However, given that, I feel like these were great includes that help smooth out the gameplay. The deck is also equipped with storage lands in the form of Sand Silos, Saprozen Cove, Ication Store, and even Fountain of Cho. And although all of these lands are rather slow, I found them to be quite effective whenever we need to cast those larger spells, perhaps have a massive X for Brain Geyser, or have available mana to dump within Gerard's Battle Cry, or even our Shelderin Knights. Now, we do have a few more things to cover within today's video, including the win con, as well as other unique synergies that work extremely well. Now, winning is simple. Obviously, beat your opponent to death with your band of attackers. We can do this by sneaking in the occasional hits through damage, or even pumping up our creatures. Or we can use my personal favorite, as mentioned prior, the Keldon Battle Wagon. Now, Keldon Battle Wagon is a really unique card here, because if paired with a Piety Charm or a Sarah's Blessing, we can give all of our creatures vigilance. Meaning, we can swing with all of our creatures in a single band of attackers without having to tap them, and then we may tap them as well to buff up the Keldon Battle Wagon to go in for lethal trample damage. This, of course, gets all the more effective when we have all those pump spells we have mentioned previously in the video, or in response to tapping the creatures to pump the Keldon Battle Wagon, we can even use effects such as Reconnaissance, meaning we can tap the creatures once more and buff up our Keldon Battle Wagon to lethal levels. Believe it or not, without the Reconnaissance, I've been able to swing out for lethal damage, as well as have my Keldon Battle Wagon be well over 70 power. All it takes is a little finessing, as well as proper planning, and it leads to some extremely fun yet rewarding plays. For further deck synergy, we can take this one step further and incorporate a Tefari's Veil. At just 1 generic and 1 blue mana enchantment spell that reads, whenever any creature you control attacks, it phases out at the end of combat, which not only will protect any attacker of ours from board wipes whenever it is not our turn, but it'll also prevent the Keldon Battle Wagon from destroying or sacrificing itself. As it states, when Keldon Battle Wagon attacks, sacrifice it at the end of combat. Other notable synergies should be land tax, paired with a Scroll Rack, allowing us to tutor up 3 basic lands, putting them into play, and then of course paying 1 mana to set them aside and draw that many cards. Repeat this enough, and every turn the land tax will reshuffle the top of our library, allowing for easy filtering of our deck. Elephant Graveyard is also a great utility within this brew, because it's a land that states, Tap to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool, or regenerate an elephant or mammoth, which pairs wonderfully with our noble elephant or even wart elephant, allowing us to consistently point damage towards either one during a band of attackers, and repeatedly bring it back to the battlefield. These are also great creatures in their own right thanks to the trample damage. And finally, last but not least, just for shits and giggles, we did throw in a desert for the deck for utility. I don't see this card quite working, however, just including it is funny enough. But yeah, that's gonna do it for today's deck tech. I'm very excited about this banding deck. As a matter of fact, it is one of my favorite brews to date. This was previously my general Jarkel deck featured here on the channel, which I have now dismantled. However, if you are interested in seeing a different take on mono white banding, feel free to take a look at that video linked down in the description below. Do you like this list? Let me know your thoughts and comments, as well as any suggestions on what you may change. But until then, that's gonna do it for today's video. So as always, if you want to stay tuned for future videos here on the channel, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the bell down in the bottom right hand corner of your screen. So being said, my name is Patrick, host of EDH Brutality. I thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out, guys.